In this video, I'm going to show you DreamLook AI. It's a way to train Stable Diffusion models extremely fast, and the quality looks really good. I would go down to the frequently asked questions at the very bottom here, because more than likely it'll answer questions you have about this website and how it works. You upload your images, what happens after? They delete them after 48 hours. Can use offset noise? Yes. Can use it in automatic 1111? Yes, you can. You download the model after it's made and install it like you would anything else. Make LoRa models? Yes, you can. You can extract those from your trained models. Brand new Stable Diffusion XL? Yes. It's currently in beta, so it's a little limited right now, but as time goes on, that might change a bit. The pricing, again, this may vary as time goes on, but if you use my code, you actually get 20% off for the first 100 users, so get on that now. You can also train and make a avatar. No, not you.
From the ashes of your shame and humiliation.
No, not you either. Have Avatar version 2, Avatar version 1, and a custom option. Under Avatar version 1, which trains in around 2 minutes, which is insane. It shows you the base model that utilizes the training steps that are put into it. You can choose how many images you want to generate per the style that you choose, if you're choosing that. And you can adjust the width and the height. Under version 1, you can see how it's changing the training steps, base model, and negative prompts, as well as the learning rate. You can also customize this to adjust the learning rate and any negative prompts and stuff you want to put in there. So you can choose the styles. There's 9 that you can choose currently. And as you choose these, you see how many images are going to be generated and the amount of tokens that are used per generation, the amount of training steps used as well. So if I choose another one of these, you'll see that those numbers change. And again, I can adjust how many images are generated per style too. So I can make this less. So that's only 8 images. So I have 16 total now. And those numbers change, you know, as you adjust the images you're making. And once you're happy with the styles you selected and the configuration of the avatar version that you're choosing, you drag and drop your images. It only needs about 5 to 15 images to do this.
That's insane!
So you can choose, you know, if it's a man, a woman, if it's a couple, if it's a cat, if it's a dog, you just hit start and it'll get going, which is crazy. Try that one out if you want to. But the thing I like dabbling with, and so far I've experimented with the most, is under training. You can actually make your own model and make your own avatar, if you will. So honestly, I would use these as my personal guide just to kind of see the amount of steps that are being used and the learning rates to kind of understand how that works. Under the training, you can make your adjustments there. By default, this is toggled off and you can select, you know, what type it is. You have your different options you can choose from there. And as I make these changes, the prompt is adjusting there. But under the expert mode, here's where all the fun stuff happens, because you can choose the brand new Stable Diffusion XL that's in beta. Currently, you can only make it into a diffuser, but as time goes on, I imagine that will change. And under the default Stable Diffusion 1.5, you can adjust a whole bunch of stuff as well. So you can adjust how many steps. I believe the maximum is 20,000 steps. And it tells you right here, each 5,000 training steps will cost you 10 tokens.
Bonus 10.
For the price that you're paying to generate, say, like 3 different styles or something, cost you 10 tokens, you can actually make your own model, which is amazing. So you can drag and drop, again, 5 to, what was the recommended here, 15 images, and drag and drop that in there and make your own custom model and then use it an infinite amount of times, which is crazy. You can make models of your friends, of your pets, of your, you know, neighbors, whatever you want to do. Favorite car. Like, you can drag and drop and make your model in minutes, which is crazy. So fine-tuning steps, and it's really cool that if you hover over, it kind of tells you what these all do. Depending on what you're making, you're going to play around with the steps and the learning rate. So for an art style, you want to have quite a few images. I would say closer to like the 100 to 200 image range. And your learning rate, you're gonna have to play around with this. You want it to train longer for more images if you're training it on a style. To further illustrate learning rates, let's look at this graph that I made real quick. You have our learning rate, the default setting of the 1E-6, our lower learning rates and our higher learning rates. And to further explain that, let's just use some sticky notes. To try to explain this a little further, I'm gonna try to write this out. My handwriting's terrible, so I apologize in advance. So essentially the formula I'm looking at is the number of images either times 100 with a learning rate of 1e-6, or the number of images times 200 with a learning rate of 5e-7. So the learning rates, when you're training it on a person or an object, ideally you can start off with this base here of 1e-6. So it's going to be the number of images times 100 with that learning rate. And that's pretty good. That's a pretty good start for a person or an object. When you're training it on a style, you'd probably have more steps per image. So your image times 200 with a slightly different learning rate of 5e-7. So to best understand how that works, for my model for Kim Jung-gi, this is essentially what I had. I had 65 images and I multiplied that by 200 with a learning rate of 5e-7, which gave me 13,000 steps. And I also tried the same number of images times 100 with the learning rate of 1e-6, which gave me 6,500 steps. So picture a small dog and a big dog running across the same field, right? And they're trying to get to the same destination. So the small dog would have to take a lot of small steps to get to the same area. The big dog will only have to take fewer steps to get to that area, right? So this is essentially what's happening with your learning rate. So a higher learning rate would be these larger changes, like the big dog running across the field, and a lower learning rate would be like the small dog running across the field. It's taking a lot of steps to get to that same place. So you would use a higher learning rate if you're training it on a person or an object, because you don't need that many photos to get to this the end result there. But if you're training it on an art style, you need a lot more steps. So picture that like the little dog running across the field. So it's going to be a lot more subtle changes in that training to get to that final image or that final stage. Hopefully that makes a little bit more sense when it comes to learning rates, when you have a higher learning rate and a lower learning rate. Anyway, let's dive back into the video. You want to have a lot of images and train it for longer to kind of have it understand what the style that you're going for looks like. It's going to be a little bit of fine tuning this, but the default is a really good place to start, as it even says here. Starts at the 1e-6. Play around with your learning rates. I tried the extremes of both of these and I had it maxed out at like 200 images, 20,000 steps, and I tried the learning rate at 1e-7 and then the 1e-4.
A lot of boring math later.
So when I had the learning rate, because I made quite a bit of models, I started putting that within the actual name of the model itself. But when I had it set to 1e-4, again, this is like maxed out settings, it started getting the overall look of like the texture, because a lot of the art I was training on was like traditional art with markers and pen. So it got like the texture of that, but not at all the likeness or what I was asking it to do. And then the opposite's true. When I had it trained at, again, max out stats, but this was set to a learning rate of 1e-7, it made what I wanted it to do, but the art style wasn't there at all. So hopefully that's a little clearer at what I mean. Like, it got the texture and stuff that I wanted, not the art, and like the art style was there, but not at all the prompt. Like it did not know what I was trying to ask it to do. And then the opposite was true here, where it did what I wanted to do, but the art style was just non-existent. Back here in DreamLook AI, so again, when I had it set to the max, and at the very top here, it followed the prompt, but didn't really have the style. And when I had it set at the bottom here, it had the style, but not really following the prompt. So this is why you're gonna have to play around with this. This is a good starting point, but I'm gonna experiment and try one of these learning rates here to see if that does a little better job. Are you training this on a person, a style? Like this is the default to have. UKJ person is a good default prompt. So if you're creating your model on you, which you plan to be using to make like an avatar,
then everything changed.
you can leave this as your name, or just leave this as the default if you want to. Upload your images. And then next is the base model. What is the main model going to be utilizing? So you have quite a few different options to choose from. But yeah, these are the base models that your images are going to be like kind of meshed with. So check that one out. So image cropping. So if you haven't already made your image to the correct size, I like using a separate app called PhotoMill, but you don't necessarily need to use this. So if you don't want to use paid apps, there's free web services like BIRME.net, and this essentially allows you to resize an image to the correct size. And what this is doing is basically what this is doing. So this is saying it's going to crop to the center of an image, and this will crop to the face of an image. And if you go back into this website, what this is saying is by default, if you have it cropped to the center, it's cropping off all the border and keeping whatever's in the middle of this. And if you're cropping to the face, it's going to look at your image and analyze it briefly and say, hey, here's basically where the face is at, and it's going to make the image. So it crops it by default, and the size for Stable Diffusion 1.5, just the default size, is 512 by 512. So it's going to crop all your images, so you can batch edit a bunch of images to create your data set and have it auto detect the focal point, which is what I would have toggled on, honestly. And I'll leave all those default settings. Once you're happy with that, you would say save as zip, and it will create a new zip file that'll start downloading, and it'll have all your images resized properly. Once that's all done, you can go back into DreamLook AI and then upload all those images that way. So a couple options for you to do it, or if you want to edit them in Photoshop and have them, specific size, you can, or whatever you have, Photo P. If you don't have Photoshop, essentially it's Photoshop but free online. You can resize your images that way, and as long as the focal point is basically on the face and sized properly, you're good to go. So next, you have the option to choose, what do you want to make? Is it a diffuser? Is it going to be a checkpoint file? I'm going to leave it as a checkpoint file because I like using this in DiffusionBee. If you're using automatic 1111, you can have it just set to the default as well. And again, the beta version of Stable Diffusion XL only has the diffuser option currently, but that may change as time goes on. But in the 1.5, this is what we have. So to have that toggled on, if you don't want to create a safe tensor and just want a CKPT file, just toggle that off under the use safe tensor. But I like using DiffusionBee, and now you can use safe tensors in there. So I toggled that on, and you can also extract a LoRa file, which is wonderful. So this is how you do it. You just click that one button and boom. Once you create your model, you'll now have a safe tensor file and a LoRa file. If you want to, again, you can have a URL that would be called when the job finishes. The test payload contains a saved model underscore URL that points to a base Stable Diffusion 1.5 model. So you can test that out. You can also toggle on offset noise if you're not sure what that is. They have a wonderful option here. Let's open this in a new tab. They have a breakdown of what this is. Offset noise essentially will allow you to have more contrast, very bright images or very dark images. So the example they have is this image at night with and without offset noise. And they have the offset noise on the left, or without offset noise on the left, sorry, and with offset noise on the right. So you have more high contrasting images. So without it, with it, if you scroll down, and it shows you how to turn that on and utilize it. And someone also made a video kind of breaking that down further, so go ahead and check this guy's video out, and they go into more detail about that. But for the example I have, I don't need something with this much contrast, so I don't really need to have that toggled on. But if you have a bunch of images with like photography and you want to train something with more contrast, or if you have like paintings or something in an art style that requires more contrast, then play around and see if that looks best for you. Diving back into DreamLook AI, again, this is where the fun of experimenting comes into play. So try making a model with it, try making a model without it, try making a model with more steps or fewer steps, and faster learning rates or slower learning rates. This is where there's no one straight answer for any questions you have about this. Like what will give me the best looking model? Like you just have to kind of play around with it until it starts to look right. Image captions. This will also help when you're making your model. And if you're not sure what that is, use image captions instead of a single instance prompt. So you'll need a JSON file, and you can check this little document for the details. Essentially, it's like a text document that accompanies the images. So it's like a one-to-one. So if you have an image called, I don't know, butterfly 1 or something, you'll have to have a text file that's also labeled the same thing. And within that text file, you're describing what's in that image. And it just kind of helps the learning process of this. And that can take a very, very long time to do. So you gotta have some patience when you're making your models if you're using the captions. You only have to do it that one time though. Once you have those made, you're good to go. I'm not gonna do this for this example, but you know, if you have the time, go for it. That was a lot to cover, I know. Let's dive into actually making the model now. So for this, there's a few different things you can do. You can get some art books. You can find some images online, utilize some of your old artwork. You can take some photos, whatever images you want to use to train. This is where you can actually drag and drop this into here. For this, I dragged in about 109 images. Again, for the style, you want to have a lot of images. I wanted to focus on the face. I'm going to use Stable Diffusion 1.5 as the base. Again, you can use, for something like this, because it's more of an art style that's more cartoony and more like comic book style, you can try using the Anything version 3. But it does tend to give your images or your style a lot more of like an anime influence. So just keep that in mind, depending on the art style you're going for. I'm just going to leave it as the default. Have my safe tensors toggled on and the extract LoRa toggled on. Just press start job. So I try to stay organized with mine, so I made folders and subfolders and try to make sure it's like everything's labeled correctly. So if I do need to go back and retrain a model for some reason, I know what learning rate I used, how many steps were used in that model, just so I, have a ballpark range of what needs to be fixed. There we go. So this is the Scotty Young LoRa file that's created, and the safe tensor version should be done in a second here. Now I have my model completely made, trained, downloaded, and now all I have to do is install it in whatever interface I want to use. So I'm using this in DiffusionBee. Select my model that I just made, press open, and this might take a minute for it to install depending on, again, your computer speed. Now I wish I can say everything went smooth with no problems, but I'd be lying. I ended up having to retrain these models like 3 or 4 times. I made all the mistakes so you don't have to. If you're training it on a person or an object, you can use like the default settings of the learning rate of 1E-6 and multiply the number of images by 100. Just basically add 2 more zeros to whatever number you have, and your model will look like the person pretty much, or the object. So for a style, however, you're basically having twice as many steps. So it'd be times 200. And I found, instead of maxing out all of my stats, because my results just were not looking good, I ended up reducing the amount of images. Instead of having it like to 200 images, I brought it down to, I think, anywhere from 60 to about 90 images. And I trained that at 200 steps. And my learning rate I had set to 5E-7, and that seemed to yield the better results. So this was when I had it at basically too many too many images and not a slow enough learning rate. Or sorry, the learning rate just didn't match the amount of images. And then when I reduced the images and adjusted my learning rate, it started looking a lot more appealing to me. So I trained it on 2 different artists. One I had for Scotty Young. If you've never seen his artwork, check it out. Phenomenal artist, does a lot of really cool pen and ink drawings. Excuse me. He does a lot of really cool pen and ink drawings. And also made one from artwork by Kim Jung-gi. He's this phenomenal Korean artist. Unfortunately passed away, but his artwork is it's breathtaking. Like, that's like the understatement of all understatements. If there's some videos of him drawing online, but I tried to make a model based off of his style, and it's so diverse and unique, it's kind of hard to replicate. And yeah, like you can see as I'm scrolling here, just so many different versions of these models I was trying out. And I don't even know if I tried the Buzz Lightyear one. Let's try this while I'm talking. So I'm going to make the Scotty Young version of Buzz Lightyear here. So let's see what this looks like. This one was at 9,300 steps at a learning rate of 1E-6. And these are all the same amount of images used for training, just slightly different learning rates. So I had 93 images, I believe, for this one. But anyway, yeah, so I tried training it at these different amounts, and my results were just all over the place. It was getting really frustrating. But I think, like I said, if you stick to that basic idea of having, for a style, anywhere from 60 to about 90 images, and your learning rate at around 5E-7, you should be pretty close to the ballpark of where you want to be. There's no one rule that will work for everything, so you'll have to experiment a bit. And before I forget, let me remind you guys, use the promo code ProtoART and get 20% off for the first 100 people. So yeah, take advantage of that. It's a really cool service. Like I said, I've tried this quite a few times now. It makes this a lot less of a headache versus using DreamBooth. Like, granted, I feel like you do have a little bit more control when you are using DreamBooth, but this does a fantastic job without all the extra bells and whistles, and I can't complain because the results look pretty cool. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment of what you'd like to see me cover next. If you're brand new to this channel, I cover a little bit of everything art related, whether it's digital art, traditional art, acrylics, watercolor, oil painting, airbrush painting. Yeah, kind of dabble with a little bit of everything, yo. Oh, that looks pretty cool. Sorry, I just wanted to see what this thing would look like. And oh yes, I will also have these models available on CivitAI. I'll probably have this video up before I have the models, but they'll be linked to this video. And yeah, if you haven't joined the Discord for DiffusionBee, because I'm always on there pretty active, check that one out too, because there's all kinds of cool tips and tricks on how to improve generating your images. If you haven't checked out the previous videos on how to improve your images, check those out. I'll have those also linked in the description below. And I think that's it. Alright, you guys, you have a good evening, afternoon, or morning, wherever you're at in the world, and I will talk to you all later.